What's good, folks? Welcome to another episode of the Cover One Film Room, presented, of course, by the Cover One Sports Network. I'm one of your two hosts on this evening, Anthony Prohaska, joined, as always, by Eric Turner. And Eric, bit of a fun episode tonight. Well, it's always a fun episode here in the film room, but some of the Stefon Diggs drama has died down a little bit. We have a really fantastic guest that we're going to bring in a little bit. So it's a much better position than we were in yesterday when we went live with the breaking news of Stefon Diggs missing day one of minicamp, and it was kind of all panic buttons go. We're in a little bit better position as a fan base right now, which makes it better for us because now we can kind of step back out of that drama and live where we like to live, which is really breaking down the schematics and the X's and O's and the hows and whys of this game. So how you feeling?
Good, man. A little more definition, right? As you said, a little more comfort for us. And it sounds like there's a little more comfort among the fan base. Mm-hmm. There's still discussions, which we're going to talk about that tonight. But obviously there's a little more definition and clarity from practice and the pressers today. So that's very good to hear, obviously. And so we're going to bring in our special guest tonight, who's going to talk about his opinions and share his thoughts on some of the main topics and some of the updates from camp, because there were practices, right, Ant?
Absolutely. We had practice yesterday and then another practice today, which Stefon Diggs was present at. So everyone can, put their torches and pitchforks away. And with that being said, we welcome to the show Mr. Alex Brasky of the Batavia Daily News. Alex, we have been a fan, of your work for a decent amount of time, and even more so, especially when there's really like actual footage that we need and stuff to go to. So we appreciate the hell out of you for taking the time and joining us, especially on a busy day and a busy time for you. So welcome and thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. I think that goes both ways. Big fan of what you guys do at Cover One. Appreciate the interaction. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, you do provide, you provide a lot of content and context. We always talk about context in the film room, and I think you do a great job of that, which is why we love sharing your content and tuning into what you have going on. But for viewers or listeners that don't really know your background or who you work for, kind of give us a background on you as a person that now gets to cover the Bills.
Yeah, I just started really on the beat, I would say, last year. Really took it full on, as they say. Before I just went to the games and covered the games, but really last year I took it a step further, started attending practices, training camp every day, and really learned a lot from the other guys and girls on the beat, bouncing off ideas from them and just being around and learning about what's going on a day-to-day basis in an NFL team. But I started in sports. I started my own sports blog. I guess they called it back then. It was called Batavia's Best. It was mainly high school sports, which is really popular around our region, the Glow region, they call it, in Genesee, Livingston, Orleans, and Wyoming. I started that, got hired by the Batavia Daily News. 4 years later, I've now been promoted to the sports editor and really trying to ramp up our coverage of the Bills and also the Sabres and stuff like that, and really put us on the map in that regard.
Alex, what's that, as you transition to more of the beat world, just like real quickly off the top, because I feel like people don't really necessarily grasp like what's that life like for you, like with the constant like traveling and shuffling and like what you're doing on the beat. Like what's life like, on the beat covering a team like you do?
Well, for me, I think it's a little bit different than my colleagues. I drive to the games. Really, if it's within 10 hours, that's really my stopping point. I'll drive to those games on the road. At home, I commute from Batavia, which on game days usually takes me about an hour 45 minutes, depending on what time I leave. But I would say my position is a little bit unique, kind of coming from the outside in Batavia, looking in and really starting to acclimate myself to the surroundings. But day to day, it's just kind of waiting on the news to drop. And with the Bills, it seems like it's a never-ending flow of news every single day. Something else comes up, and it's just been a really interesting experience. And at times, it's been a learning experience, particularly covering the Damar Hamlin situation, something so intense and of sense. It's been a blast. It's really a labor of love, as they say. For me, I don't consider a day that I'm covering the Bills a day in the office. So,
no, that's awesome. And as someone who started this brand as a blog, and I think that's so cool to hear. The different career path that you've taken, and it's one that not a lot of guys on the beat or that do this professionally have that type of career path, right? So it's a little different, which, again, all hats off to you for that. But let's talk about, the practices, today and yesterday, some of the injuries, the guys that weren't practicing. Let's start off there because, again, we're watching this from afar. We're on social media. We're tuning in and reading your content. We're not there. You're there. Let us know who was practicing, who wasn't, and maybe what you saw from them.
Yeah, they've had great attendance, as Sean McDermott mentioned on day one of minicamp practice. Everybody but Stefon Diggs was in attendance, and now with Stefon Diggs showing up, that attendance has improved to 100%. But there have been a few players held out. Jordan Phillips has not practiced really at all this spring. Neither has Mitch Morse. Dawson Knox was injured during day one, late during the practice, kind of went down after being contacted by Kaiir Elam. And I believe the other one blanks me. I believe Taylor Rapp was in on the play. Yeah. He went down and appeared to injure into practice, and he didn't practice today. He had a sleeve on that leg. He was present at practice, walking around, maybe a little bit gingerly. I wouldn't really put too much stock into that, but so Phillips, Morris haven't practiced. Cam Dantzler wasn't seen on the practice field today. And also Justin Shorter has been nursing an injury. He was working with trainers today as well.
Alex, you mentioned, I don't know if this is an update or breaking news for anyone, but Stefon Diggs was not present for day one of minicamp at practice. And he was there and present today. You put out several, videos and screenshots and pieces. I also love you did a quote tweet of one of the shows here on our network that was like, quote this with like the most iconic photo of all time. And you did it with Diggs and Allen kind of like touching hands as they were like warming up
Creation
together.
of
Like,
man.
very well played by you. Yeah, they were beautiful. Beautiful. And Michelangelo and God. Talk about what.
Touching.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that was well done by you. From your vantage point, your perspective today, kind of just hit us with that Stefon Diggs update. How did, what kind of spirits did he seem to be in? How did he look on the practice field? What were your initial impressions from him suiting up a bit today and getting out on the field with everybody?
Yeah, he participated in individual drills and positional work, but did not take part in 11-on-11. Was off to the side during that portion, but he did catch some passes. I believe only one fell incomplete, and immediately after he went back to the front of the line and ran the same route, and they completed it. And I think his spirits were high. His spirits always seem high at practice. I wrote in my story on the dailynewsonline.com that if you didn't know any better, you would have thought that it was just another day at practice. He was out there dancing around. He was high-fiving his teammates. He was even coaching up a couple of the wide receivers, Keyshawn Johnson and Jalen Wayne. So Stefon Diggs is going to be Stefon Diggs. I don't think anything is going to bring his energy down. He's a high energy player. He really brings that to the locker room, and that's one of the most valuable aspects of his game on top of the talent that he produces on the field. But I don't think there's much to say about this moving forward. I also wrote that I think this is much ado about nothing. I think if it weren't for McDermott saying that he was very concerned, maybe a bit of a slip of the tongue, I don't think we would have talked about it as much as we have.
Yeah, I mean, and everyone's talked about it when it comes to the press conferences, and that's kind of my next topic for you is the press conference for McDermott and kind of your takeaway on McDermott and how he handled today and kind of, as you said, kind of put things to rest because there was a lot of drama surrounding, the first couple minutes of that presser yesterday, and a lot of people, and I'm sure you're included to a degree, believe that he could have handled it a little differently. But considering how they had met for a couple days and probably just met right before practice, right before he came out there and had the presser, I'm sure there was still some emotions there. And it sounded like the discussion maybe had, hit one of those higher tones and got a little heated for obviously two very fiery guys. McDermott may show his poise a lot, right? But he obviously is a fiery guy, and we hope that kind of trickles into the defense overall. But I want to get your thoughts on the presser today from McDermott and what he said, a guy who is very calculated with his words, and what he said today, and what type of clarity do you believe that provided?
Yeah, I think it provided plenty of clarity, but he certainly walked back his comments, as I said, from the day before. He went from very concerned to letting us know that he actually excused Stefon Diggs from practice. So those two things don't really mesh with me. If you're excusing a player from practice and you're kind of aware of the situation, I don't know if that concern level would really be ratcheted up that high, but apparently he felt differently, and he really fell back on coach speak, as he typically does, and most coaches do for that matter. He said,
Yeah.
listen, he's a coach first, and with these guys, he's really got to be all in all the time, and any of his players miss practice, he's concerned. And with a player of Stefon Diggs' caliber, that just kind of really goes up another level. And I think that's where the very concern came from, and that really made Bills Mafia very concerned. The result. But moving forward, he says he believes that the situation is resolved, and there's really nothing to worry about moving forward. But I guess we'll see when we talk to Stefon Diggs at training camp, now that this final minicamp practice has been canceled.
All right.
Yeah, it's definitely something. I think even with what McDermott said today and Diggs back at practice, I think this is something where everybody's trying to keep their finger on the pulse a little bit and see how things progress. Another piece that fans are trying to keep their finger on the pulse on is the linebacker competition for that middle linebacker spot opposite of Matt Milano for the Buffalo Bills with the departure of Tremaine Edmunds. Alex, you've been pretty good with the linebacker videos going all the way back to OTAs and showing, what Dorian Williams is doing, Terrell Bernard, AJ Klein, Dodson, Spector, what they've been doing in drills, how they've been progressing. You had a couple clips from minicamp this week as well. What has been your standout or, biggest takeaway at this point, at this juncture in the offseason when it comes to the linebacker spot? Do you think anyone is, do you think someone's ahead of the pack? Is it someone has stood out in some way positively or negatively? What's been your biggest takeaway, or where's your head at when it comes to the linebackers right now for this team?
It's tough to determine with the few practices we've watched this spring and the short time that they're doing team drills to really put anybody definitively ahead of another in terms of the competition. But in my mind, I think they want Terrell Bernard to win this job. He's a third-round pick last, kind of the player they're looking for, I think, at that position, somebody who can come up and hit, but also sit back and cover well. And spending that kind of draft capital on a player, I think you're looking to get a return. And with that spot being vacated with Edmunds' departure, I think they're hoping that Bernard steps in and fills the role. But if he's unable to, they do have two veterans, Terrell Dodson and AJ Klein, who I'm sure are capable of the job, but I think they're looking for more than just capable. Dorian Williams, also a third-round pick, drafted this year. And early in, I believe, rookie minicamp, they mentioned that he's competing for that middle linebacker job. But then when Sean McDermott was asked about it on Tuesday, he named everybody but Dorian Williams.
But
So I'm not sure if that's just like a coach pecking order thing where you don't want to mention the rookie or get his hopes up or what that is. And maybe he put his foot in his mouth a little bit for mentioning him. I would say that I think that they want Terrell Bernard to win the job. That would just be my take on the situation.
Now, let me ask you, as you said, there's not much contact going on. They're kind of installing certain things and then just rehashing them each of these practices. So those linebackers that you mentioned, they're all a little bit different in their own ways. So if, maybe you don't know the pecking order, you have your expectation that, you're hoping and expecting that, Bernard kind of takes a job there. But what are the differences that you're seeing, when you look at Dodson in there versus Bernard, or when Williams is in there? Are there any differences in just movement, physically, anything that stands out that kind of gives fans an idea and some of that context to this time of the year when there is no hitting, when there are no pads?
Yeah, like I said with Bernard, I think he's more versatile in terms of his skill set and really his athleticism in terms of his ability in coverage. And I think that's something that may stand out moving forward, and maybe something that I don't know if it was lacking with Tremaine Edmunds, but he just seemed to be maybe a step off here once in a while. I know that that's kind of been a hot topic with fans and analysts alike in terms of his ability and his value to the Bills defense. But I think Bernard really presents that ability to play at both levels and really present a threat in coverage.
It's funny you saying that. I'm trying to not to smirk because we've broken down the linebackers here on the show with film and tape and everything, and the conclusion we came to is kind of echoes a lot of the sentiments you just spoke on there. With Bernard is kind of like, and I don't want to say this in a disrespectful way or backhanded compliment kind of way, but he's almost like the lesser of all the evils. There's not one area where he's deficient in compared to the other linebackers. He's above average at almost everything, and he fits in a lot of ways mentally and physically, coverage standpoint, coming forward standpoint, that they like to have on that side of the ball. So Erik and I don't want to speak for Erik, but I imagine both of our ears perked up as soon as you would I imagine Terrell Bernard was like, oh, interesting. So we appreciate that insight. Let's flip to the other side of the ball.
Still a long way to go, but
yes,
that's what I think that the team's probably hoping for, just based on where they drafted him and his skill set and what they're hoping for out of the position.
Absolutely. Nothing's decided right now where we're sitting here in June in mandatory minicamp being like, here's the starting roster, here's the depth chart. So yeah, completely understood. Flip it to the other side of the ball offensively, non-Stefon Diggs related. What are your takeaways on that side of the ball, this far in the offseason, with whether it could be OTAs related or what you've seen so far in minicamp? Who's caught your eye on the offensive side of the ball and why?
I mean, the obvious one is Dalton Kincaid. I think he's fitting right in. I think he's really, I use the word again, acclimated himself well to this offense. And he just seems to fit with Josh Allen and Dawson Knox, their personalities, the way that they interact on the field. It really has seemed to be a seamless introduction to this offense for Dalton Kincaid. And also, I think Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy are going to be critical to what this team does on offense. I think obviously Sherfield's been talked about a lot. Hardy maybe a little bit lesser so, but especially in this mini camp, I've seen Hardy really all over the field, catching balls in all sorts of different locations and really setting himself up for that run after the catch ability that this team's been so desperate for the past number of years. And another one, Gabe Davis, in a contract year. Not sure if they're going to offer him anything before the season starts. He obviously needs a big season to put his best foot forward in claiming a new contract, whether it be with the Bills or on the free agent market.
Yeah. Now, one other guy that I know you've been, talking about a lot on the defensive side of the ball, though, is Trey White, man. So we see a lot of the videos you post and other guys from the beat post. And I know Anthony and I are both excited to watch him bounce back this year. We're expecting a huge bounce back from Trey White. So what are you seeing in camp? Again, maybe some of his movements, his personality being back on the field, and then just, getting back to that routine with the other defensive backs that have been there for many years.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think it's all in his body movements. He just seems so much more aggressive, confident, and just willing in everything that he's doing out there on the practice field. Last year, and rightfully so, seemed a little bit tentative coming back from that ACL injury, and he had never experienced anything like that throughout his athletic career. So I think that was really a mental hurdle for him to get over, and I think he's finally gotten over that, and he really just seems like the old Trey White out there. And on top of that, this is always the case with Trey White. He just seems in great shape. I mean, it's mini camp and OTAs, and he's out there looking in midseason form where a couple of these guys use that period to kind of round themselves into shape. I think he's looking to regain that all-pro status this year, and he's really setting himself up to do so with the way that he's going about his business during OTAs and minicamp.
That's really awesome to hear, especially with it aligning in theory of, year two coming back from an ACL reconstruction. You usually tend to see more of a, semblance of return to form from what you were prior to the injury. So it's awesome to hear that level of confidence that he's playing with and what he's exhibiting out there on the practice field. Let's stay in the secondary, Alex. Let's flip it to the other cornerback spot. Kaiir Elam, Christian Benford, Dane Jackson, and maybe another potential sneaky candidate or emerges like Christian Benford did last year. But what's been your thoughts on the cornerback competition for CB2 thus far in the offseason?
Yeah, clearly those three, I think, are in competition for that job. I think the team really maybe favored Dane Jackson a bit due to his experience in the system and just his reliability at the position. Maybe not as high of a ceiling as a Kaiir Elam, but really a reliable player and a player that's shown that reliability within the Bills system over a couple of years. I think a surprise candidate may be Jamarcus Ingram. I know he's been mentioned by various people throughout the offseason training, and he had a good practice today. I think he had one, maybe two interceptions and was in on a couple of plays as well. He's really put his best foot forward during this offseason, and we saw him during last training camp, I believe it was, really have a good training camp as well. So I really think it's those top three in competition for that job. Maybe Dane Jackson, a minor leg up just due to his reliability and experience in the system. But as is the case with Terrell Bernard, as I said with him, I think the team really wants its young, higher draft picks to work into the fold. And I think they really want Kaiir Elam to take that step. And I think they're really waiting for him to do that. Christian Benford has made things tough on both players as well. But I think Elam has the highest ceiling. Obviously, you see where he was drafted. And I think the team it would really behoove them for him to step into that role and bull by the horns.
Yeah, I would agree. I do think they want Elam to win that job. And now you have McDermott calling the plays and being a lot more involved. And we're going to see some tweaks, defensively to their philosophy. And I think, whether they blitz more or they're just more aggressive, mindset wise, I do think that Elam's skill set overall and ceiling, as you said, is much higher than the other guys. Again, it comes down with young guys, it comes down to consistency. It comes down to practice. And so, seeing that and you're able to see that in practice. And right now, again, it's early guys, in these practices in camp. And so it was good to hear that about Elam. But Alex, once again, man, thank you for joining us in the film room. It's definitely not going to be the last time we have you in here. We're having you here again to do some breakdowns with us eventually, and also again provide those updates. So before you leave, let us know where people can find you on social media, in your work and everything that you cover for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, you can find me anywhere at Alex Brasky. You can also find us at the Batavia Daily News on Facebook, Twitter. We're starting Instagram here as we go. The dailynewsonline.com is our website. Feel free to check out any of our reports on minicamp and training camp upcoming. Looking to create some more, maybe some more digital and stuff like that. But it's really been a joy being on with you guys, and I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Alex, man. We appreciate it, man. And again, keep up the great work, and we'll be tuning in. Appreciate it.
Talk soon.
Bye, Alex. Man, awesome.
Yeah, he's good stuff, man. As soon as he came on the scene and you saw a lot of his work, you got to treat, because again, it's nice to hear a different voice, a different take, a guy that's not all about the group think, because that can happen. You're hanging out, like when we're at camp or we're at practices, we're at the Senior Bowl, we're all talking about the same things. We're discussing the game, the players and whatnot. And there are certain, obviously, times where we share a lot of the same opinions because we're sitting there talking about it together. And I've noticed with Alex, he does have his own voice and take on things. And it was great to have him on the show.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's nice to see not necessarily someone kind of straying away from the pack for the sake of straying away from the pack, but you often see on the beat, like there's the same plays even, or like the same things that everybody puts out. But Alex tends to have just a different vantage point or a different lens to it. And it's been awesome to, see him be able to provide that other perspective and that other look for us, especially as we're trying to consume, especially now when there's like no football actually happening. We're trying to consume every bit of on-field action that we can. So we'll take the more that we can get. And Alex providing that other lens for it has been, a blessing to us here on the show and at the brand. So it was awesome to have him on, and a lot of insight from him. And some insight we got today as well from Mr. Greg Rousseau, who we're going to show in this clip. I tweeted this out earlier. This is like an Inception moment. Like you're pulling up a tweet from me and I'm talking about it. It's like weird. So, Rousseau spoke earlier today for about 5 minutes with the media. And in this clip that I put out earlier, he spoke on Sean McDermott's ability to, quote, articulate about the defense as a defensive coordinator, and then how that'll tie into their play style this year. And if you watch this show regularly, when Greg Rousseau talks about the play style, you will find that it, coincidentally or not, seems to align with something that Erik and I have been talking about all offseason when it comes to what we can expect from a Sean McDermott-led Bills defense in 2023.
When he's in that room with us, he has that defensive coordinator hat on. So, like, you see him as the defensive coordinator, and he does a real good job. I feel like just talking through everything, like, he's increased all of our understandings, I think, of all of our understandings of the scheme a lot more. Like, he's saying, like, we do this because for this reason, or we do this because of this. So, I mean, it's been great to be able to listen to Sean articulate about the defense in the defensive meeting room. I think it's going to be real aggressive, and and not just a blitz.
Oh no.
I'm sorry.
Eric's trying to deprive us of this
I
awesome
know. I'm
content, but
sorry.
he's bringing he's bringing it back up. But in that first piece, you know, you hear Rousseau talking about what McDermott has brought to the defensive, you know, room as the DC. Now in this back half of this clip, he's going to talk about
I love
kind of
this
style. Yeah, this part is absolute gold.
Our mindset, and I feel like a lot of being able to play fast comes with understanding the scheme, understanding what you're doing allows you to play with more aggression. If you're kind of like in between, you're like, oh, maybe I should do this, then you're not going to be playing as fast or as aggressive. So just having a full grasp of the defense and all the concepts, I feel like will push players to play more physical, more aggressive, and faster.
I mean, aggressive, physical, and faster. I mean, what else? What else do you need on a defense? It's exactly what Bills fans want to hear, right? And like, we're excited because of what McDermott's going to bring to the defense. We've had several shows where we've gone over what we think and expect from this defense. So when you hear a young player, talk about how McDermott is able to articulate things, how they get a better understanding of the schemes and concepts that will allow them to play faster, more physical, and more aggressive. It's super great to hear. It's super refreshing to hear, especially when you talk about McDermott compared to Leslie Frazier. But in the end, why this is great, because it really gets the juices flowing for McDermott, the teacher, right? You know, he's able to teach again. That's why he was so excited to be back in on that side of the ball, back in the locker room with those guys in those rooms, meeting rooms, teaching this defense, teaching the schemes and techniques and assignments. It's got to be fun from a McDermott standpoint, but also from a player standpoint, especially, you know, a lot of these players, as I said earlier, when Alex was here, they've been in the defense for many years now. So now it's got to be a refreshing take on, again, a pretty similar defense. We'll see some different tweaks, but overall, it's going to be the same.
Yeah, the core identity overall will still be present there. But Eric, like you alluded to, and like we've talked about so much on the show and so much this offseason, we anticipated several tweaks with the change from Leslie Frazier to Sean McDermott. And we've broken down game tape from the Panthers days of Sean McDermott as their defensive coordinator. We tied in some early Bills defensive looks in the Sean McDermott tenure for some games that he was calling plays and things. And we brought in that idea of, you know, under Sean McDermott, we expect more aggression, more physicality from a schematic standpoint. But what's also so great to put in and is what Rousseau articulated here, the idea of being in the right spot mentally and knowing your assignment and knowing what you're supposed to do. And that ties into, Eric, your point about McDermott, the teacher. That allows you to play fast. And we've talked about that with Tremaine Edmonds, for example, at times. Like if you're caught trying to process so much, you're thinking more than you're reacting and more than you're playing. And like Rousseau said it, like if you're sitting there trying to think, oh, what should I do here? What should I do there? You can't play fast. And that's an aspect that I think gets lost for a lot of fans, where sometimes being fast on the field, it's not just about having a great short shuttle, or a great 20-yard split, or a 40-yard dash, or being quick off the line, or being athletic, or calling a blitz. A lot of it sometimes is tied to, and not even a lot, sometimes, a lot of it all the time is tied to what you can process mentally and knowing your assignment and being able to have the confidence to execute and just come out of the gates because you know what to do, you know how to adjust, and you know how to execute.
Yeah, as you said, you know, the less things you have to think about, the faster you can play. And he said that as well. And it's refreshing to hear from him, because again, the Bills are going to need him to step up. They're going to need some of their other edge guys to step up. And for the most part, over the course of Rousseau's career, I think he's been sneaky better than most fans realize, right?
Absolutely.
It's something we've talked about. And yeah, it maybe, you know, some of the sacks that he had last year weren't of high quality. They're cleanup type sacks. We always hear that, like with him in his career. But let's face it, that is also a positive. That, hey, if he's getting into the quarterback late in the play, that's because of his hustle, his tenacity, and sticking in the play and things like that. So some of these plays, you're going to see him get to the quarterback late and create that disruption late in the play. But again, if he's playing faster, maybe he converts more of those pressures into sacks. And we're talking high quality sacks, winning one-on-ones, you know, at a higher rate than he did the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point to make. And Eric, in some of these clips too, what's also really encouraging, You're seeing more technical prowess from him in these clips from year 2. You're seeing some wrist control. You are seeing him, create that half-man relationship and working through a shoulder. You are seeing him set guys up and attack offensive tackles and guards based on angles. You're seeing that pass rush plan start to come together, which is something he talked about last offseason and what he was wanting to work on going into last season. And so if you can get him to start to play faster and more confidently because he knows his assignment, like this clip right here that you're going in slow motion against the Chiefs, against Andrew Wiley, this is an easy piece. Like, look at him establish first touch with the right hand. Look at the lift with the left hand. He just completely disrupts Wiley's attempt to kind of latch on and just lifts that outside arm from Wiley with that wrist control. Like, that's not easy to do, and that's purposeful and planned by Rousseau. You saw it in multiple clips here that you showed. That's very encouraging for a second-year player who was green and raw coming into the league. He gets to build on that into this year, and if he's playing faster and or more confidently because of what he's learned mentally from Sean McDermott, the teacher, Erik, it's a really scary thought for a guy who, like you said, had a very sneaky good year 2 that really hasn't been talked about enough.
Yeah, and as I said, like from day one, Rousseau was one of the better run defenders on the edge, which
Absolutely.
Coming out of college, you're a Miami guy, so you watch a lot of them.
Yeah.
Coming out, that I didn't think that's how he would excel early on, but he damn right off the bat established himself as one of the better, almost in that upper echelon tier of stopping the run. And he can do that because of his size, his length, and ability to win first touch against the run, control his gaps, and control 2 gaps in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
The way he rushes the quarterback and stops the run as he's rushing the quarterback. So we've seen that from day one. He's been consistent when it comes to stopping the run. Now, as we talked about, getting that consistency when it comes to creating that pass rush plan, executing it, going 1 to 2 to 3, countering, the initial move or set from an offensive lineman and doing it consistently to win. That's the next step. But he has been, when you look at PRP, pass rush productivity rates, he's actually been pretty good. When Von Miller went out last year, there wasn't much of a drop off, and he was one of the few that didn't really have a drop off when Von Miller exited the lineup.
Yeah, and a decent chunk of those games came with him playing on that banged up ankle that he hurt in that Jets game. So, and I think he finished in the top 20, like top 25-ish in PRP for the entire year, and then maybe dipped to like 25th or 28th when Von Miller went down. And that's, again, to your point, like that's on top of him being at worst like a top 10 edge defender in the league. But statistically and advanced metrics wise and on tape, he's played like a top 5 edge against the run. So if he can now put that pass rush piece together, which he showed glimpses of last year, and continue to build upon that, it could be a really tremendous thing for what he could do going into year 3 for this Buffalo Bills team. And Erik, like you said, they need him to. If Von misses any time, even if Von doesn't miss time, having a solid 3-man stable of Von Miller, Leonard Floyd, and Greg Rousseau to just wreak havoc off the edge would be absolutely tremendous. And someone who we already know is tremendous is Stefon Diggs. Erik, you got this clip queued up from our guest earlier in this episode, Mr. Alex Brasky. Here's Stefon Diggs running this whip route. I call it a jerk route, just because I love this is my favorite route because I learned it as a jerk route, and it's because if you execute it correctly, you make the defender look like a jerk. And Diggs is one of the best runners of it. We've got some clips for you from a game tape perspective, and here he is already on day 2 of mandatory minicamp, just running this absolutely beautifully from a technical perspective.
Yeah, whip route, jerk route, escape route. Cole Beasley called it an escape route. It was cool to see, obviously, Diggs just running routes and out there on the field, out there with the new wide receiver coach there, Adam Henry. Obviously, a big rapport, building time when we're talking about coach and player there. But there are some other clips too of not Diggs running the route, right? But him teaching others about that route. When it came to Keyshawn Johnson and his Jalen Wayne, I believe.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And it was nice to see, again, not to kind of continue to bang on this topic here, but with Diggs missing camp yesterday, there was a lot of, smoke and fire going around the idea of him not being a leader and not being a team first guy. And so it was nice to see him already on his first day of practice, day 2 of minicamp here, taken these younger guys aside and already kind of explaining to them the finer points of what looks like the route tree and how to execute things. And this is one of several clips, like him just taking these guys aside and kind of explaining how things work and how they should run things.
Yeah, because, we always talk about leverage and how Diggs is one of the best at running routes differently, running the same route differently based on leverage. And, that nuance in that route running only comes with experience. And obviously these two guys are younger guys that don't have the experience. And to see Diggs on his first day back, offering that knowledge and wisdom and talking to them on how to set up the route and how to make it look different, based on, leverage. I think that is just why you have a guy like Diggs. Yes, he performs, he produces and does all that. And more times than not, he's a leader by example. But here you see him again with all that other drama that was going on the last couple of days and this offseason. You see him there on that first day back, dropping knowledge to the younger players. That is just an encouraging and great sight to see.
Yeah, and it's something that everybody applauded Von Miller for last year with all the clips of him working with Epinesa and Boogie and Groot and kind of paying it forward with his knowledge and his technique, whether it was at actually with the Bills or at his pass rush summit in the offseason. And that's an excellent point you make. Like that's one of the benefits if you have a stud player like that who has that type of mentality to pay it forward. That's where you see that positive trickle down effect, because he can take that knowledge and upskill some guys underneath him. And this is another great clip. This is like a 40-second long one. You really see him like, this isn't just like
he's diving in.
Correct. Like he's not just like, oh, hey, run this route like this. Like he's literally coaching them up right here in drills, teaching them. And exactly like you said, diving in and showing them how to execute.
Yeah, and again, this is that whip route. And you can see Wayne, this is my interpretation. He's telling him to set up the route differently. So initially you're going to see he's asking Wayne, what did you do? He jabs outside, makes it look like a slant, and then he's going to run that whip route back out towards the sideline. But Diggs is telling him here, he goes, hey, no, set up as a two-way go. Make him think it's a two-way go. So he's adding that extra layer, because if you're just running the slant across the field, that guy can then get into your hip right away. And yeah, maybe you are able to drop your hips and accelerate out to the boundary. But by doing it this way, what Diggs does, he makes it a two-way go. Right there, you're already making that guy question, is he breaking inside or outside? Then you break inside. Okay, now he's going to drive on it hard, thinking it's in breaking route. And then that's when you snap it off back out to the sideline. Like that type of teaching moment. Again, this is why that contract and that money that Diggs makes, these are those type of moments where you're seeing that, as you said, that Von Miller effect in the wide receiver room. And it's great to see on this day with all that other nonsense going on, and how, there's all that talk about him being a bad teammate, and he's out there teaching this to the younger guys and how to set it up. Especially when you're talking this offensive scheme and these concepts and these routes and how they develop and how maybe they even connect to a different route later on. I just love that clip of how he, walked them through that. He asked them, hey, how did you run it? Okay, now this is how I would run it and why.
Yeah, and he calls Wayne over in the beginning of the clip. Like he's talking to Keyshawn. He literally like beckons for him, like calls him over, like right here, boom, like, hey, like come over here, like I want to talk to you. And it's just good vibes. Like this is what you want to see from one of your leaders and one of your better players who has that knowledge and who has that technical aspect to his game. Like that's something, if you run a 4.2 40 and you win with speed all the time, you can't teach that. You can't teach someone to go from a 4.5 to a 4.2. But if you win with technicality, that's something that can be taught. The football IQ of the game and the technical aspects of the game, depending on, where you are in your career and where you're at, it might take you a little longer. But that's kind of stuff can be learned. And so him explaining that to these young guys is key. And like Juan says here in this comment, they need to keep him involved in every game plan, regardless of the opposition, especially in pivotal moments of each game. 4 catches versus Cincy results in a huge loss. Come on, Dorsey. Fair point. I don't think it's all on Ken Dorsey. We won't open up that can of worms right now, but it's a fair point. He's a stud. You got to keep him in there. Awesome comment here from Michael with what I'm reading here. One of our insiders and regular member in the Cover One Slack channel and regular friend of ours when it comes to training camp stuff in real life. Michael says, is Diggs leading the wide receiver room? In reality, yes. The media say he's creating drama now just to give me clicks. Very fair point from Michael. And Eric, this clip, when we were going over the practice highlight there from today, this is the first one that came into my head, because how he coaches Jalen Wayne up in that clip that we just showed is exactly how he runs this route with Whitehead spinning down from the safety spot. He sets it up off the line with that two-way go. And when he sells it inside, exactly what you talked about, what did you say? If you set it up like a two-way go, when you bang it inside, it's going to make that defender drive on it. And that's exactly what happens. Diggs bangs it inside and Whitehead commits fully. And what does Diggs do? He just puts his foot in the ground, pops it back outside, instant separation.
Yeah, and it's not even again, he didn't really have to drive hard off of that little pivot route or that escape route right there, because he made that defender think he's breaking on an in breaking route right there. And so that guy has to overcommit, and he's like, oh yeah, this is money. I've seen this. I'm going to drive on that inside hip and go make a play. And so, yeah, you're right. It's not even like he's totally pivoting out wide and exiting quickly, because, again, you see a defender out there too. So he's got to have that in the back of his mind. But because he sold it as a two-way go, it allows him to uncover into that void there. And this was a huge play at the time, a really unique formation and a great setup by Diggs, as we talked about from that practice footage today. Here's another one from the Steelers game. Again, look at the leverage, attacking defenses with Diggs in the slot on another, whip route right here. Little different tempo to this one, little different eye usage on this one. And again, separating on that route. I love this one because of the eye usage, especially, and the tempo. You see him, he kind of bends it inside a little bit, right? Bends it in a little side, and then all of a sudden breaks out wide there against the linebacker. And the timing is just on point. It allows these guys to clear out. He hits that void. And then again, another good play down the sideline and first down for the Bills.
I remember when we broke this down after the Steelers game, and it was so fun. One, because of I like the initial positioning of him in the slot. It allows him to get matched up on a linebacker, which is a huge advantage. And again, what he does in this play, like you talked about now, and what you alluded to earlier, he attacks the leverage of the linebacker inside. Like, this is him. Okay, this is who my man is. He's in a different spot than what Whitehead was on the previous play. So if your man has different leverage, exactly like you said, you run the route a little bit differently. You change it up. You attack that leverage. And I love how he eats that space up, and almost, even though he's on an angle, he almost squares up with the linebacker. And you highlighted there his path there. So when Diggs attacks him, what does the linebacker do? He shuffles in response and pushes himself further inside, which is exactly what Diggs wants. So all he can do is put his foot in the ground and pop out outside. And again, similar to the previous play, Eric, like you said, Diggs doesn't have to put all this effort into pushing off and getting outside and creating separation. His eyes and his body language selling that deception in the stem of the route allows him to just simply put his foot in the ground and pop back outside, and he creates instant separation because he knows how to pace the route and attack the leverage of the defender.
Yeah, attacking the leverage, understanding that Minkah Fitzpatrick's over the top, and the different ways and coverages that defenses are playing against them. Here's one from the Chiefs game. Same formation that we saw in that Jets game. Inside leverage from the linebacker, kind of like what you saw from the Steelers game. Eyes, tempo. Again, this one's even a little more different. So now he's, again, kind of going at that defender, making it a two-way go, but his body is selling that he's going to be running an in-breaking route. And you see him actually turn to make it an in-breaking route, and then he, again, stops, pivots outside. And that timing is so important, because watch what the outside defender right here is doing. He's waiting. He's waiting. He's trapping that. If Diggs were to just run 5 yards straight at that linebacker, run an out route in that 5 to 7 yard range, that defender is going to trap it, pass, and Bolton's going to pass Diggs on to that defender, and who knows what happens then. But because of the tempo and understanding of the leverage, attacking the leverage with a different route here, making it look like he's going to be running that crossing route, and then, again, kind of pivoting out, but not pivoting out at a high speed, at top speed, allows Josh to hit him in that void, and then he can get a couple yards after the catch. I love the nuance to route running and especially when we talk about Stefon Diggs.
Yeah, he's one of the best in the world at knowing how to operate within the stem of a route and how to pace it and how all the technical pieces, the release you take, the angle that you take, how to pace it, the gear that you're at, the leverage and how you attack. You hit the my favorite point on this play. He's parallel to the sideline almost at this point. Like he looks like he's running. He comes off the line and hesitates. And then when he puts the foot in the ground here, if you're the defender, if you're Nick Bolton, you're thinking, oh, he's running a drag. He's running the over. Boom, let me pounce on it. And there's all this open space over there. Bolton knows what the coverage is. So if Diggs is running that over, he's got to get on his giddy up and he's got to close that down. So he starts to drive on it. And again, Diggs just sells it, lies, puts his foot in the ground, and then exactly to your point, paces it slow coming out so he can sit in between that trap that Kansas City's trying to run. And the way, Eric, you put these clips was perfect because the Jets clip was different than the Steelers clip and different than this clip, but this one is almost the way he paces this route and the situation that it is. It's almost like a combination of the Jets route and the Steelers route. And again, it's just another example how it's the same idea and the same concept, but based on the coverage, based on the leverage and the situation, you can pace it differently. You run it differently in order to make it work and to make you win that route. Diggs is a master at it, and him being able to try and further that knowledge and foster that knowledge, I should say, in these younger guys is a huge piece. And if he's doing it with Wayne and Johnson, he's doing that with Gabe Davis. I would imagine he's going to be doing it with Dalton Kincaid. Like, just that ability, so much of this game is built into that nuance from the receiver position. And that's why, the fastest and the biggest guys don't always make the best receivers. You got to understand that nuance. And here's a real simple one. Like you want to run this jerk route. You want to run an out route. Cool. Make them think you're going over the middle. If you want to run a deep route, make them think you're going short. If you're going short, make them think you're going deep. How do you lie to the defender? Diggs is one of the best at that.
Yeah, and what I love about this play is, yes, there's all that physical nuance post-snap, but he has to understand this coverage from the beginning in order to properly change that route to beat the leverage. Because when he's looking across the field right here, where I have it paused right here, he's looking over the middle, right? And so the defense is set up pretty well. We always talk about having a +1 in the run game or in the pass game. Here's the 3/2, right? 3/2. And then to the bottom, we have 3 eligibles, and you have 4/3, right? So they have it spaced out really well. So with that understanding prior to the snap, Diggs knows that, hey, this linebacker is going to wall off and want to jump anything across because this guy right here is paying attention to the 2 receivers to his side. So he knows that, hey, Bolton's kind of on his own if he's running it over the middle. So he, again, sets him up, bends it inside just a little bit, makes him think 100% that he is going to be running that crossing route. And if it's a 3/2 to the right side of the field, from Diggs' perspective, then he knows that, this guy at the bottom is going to be trapping. And that's why that tempo, that pace, and that spacing off of that whip route is so important, man. I mean, so much goes into this complex game. And sometimes, it's just taken for granted. We talked about it with Isaiah Hodgins.
Yep.
We always talk about it with
literally thinking that,
several players that we've had in the film room that, it's not as easy as it looks. You're probably like, look at the way they spread the field there. They kind of isolated Nick Bolton, but there's more to it than that because, again, the defense is trying to keep that advantage, right? And Diggs is a guy that, hey, maybe the scheme isn't, the best for this coverage or this defensive call, and that route concept is not going to beat that defense. But if you have a wide receiver that knows how to set up routes prior to a snap, knows how to attack leverage post-snap, like Diggs on that play, that can elevate the offense, that can elevate the offensive coordinator and make a quarterback like Josh Allen make it look a lot easier because that's just an easy pitch and catch into the void against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the Isaiah Hodgins piece from last year because that's what was in my head. Like this play, the Chiefs play is in that ballpark, and even the Steelers play and the Jets play you showed, those are all in that ballpark of if you're watching that on the broadcast, you're like, oh man, that was super easy. He just got open right away. And it's like, oh, first down, easy. It's set up though with that, with the verbiage that is used so much in today's football, the pre to post snap and how that changes. And when you've got somebody who can diagnose a coverage pre-snap and then knows how to attack it post snap, or even knows how to adjust if the coverage isn't what he thought it was pre-snap, that's where you start to see that success. That's where you start to have built-in multiplicity to what you're doing, because then you're right even when you're wrong. If you have the ability to diagnose things properly before it happens and then attack it post snap or adjust on the fly, it becomes so hard to defend. And if you can again pass that knowledge forward, and you don't just have Stefon Diggs who knows how to do that, you have 2 or 3 or 4 guys who know how to do that, then you're cooking on all cylinders. And what do you do as a defense?
Yeah. And so again, looks like a simple clip. Looks like, hey, he's showing this guy a thing here or two, but there's a lot of context in these practices if you watch them and you look for them, because yes, this is Stefon Diggs, his first day back in practices. Again, putting all that stuff aside, hopefully those issues are resolved, and he's teaching these young guys the nuance to the game, and who knows if these guys make the roster. But this is an unselfish moment, but a great teaching moment as well for Diggs and for these young players. I love context. We started the show with having Alex talk about context, whether it's competition or the press conferences, and those clips that we just broke down along with that teaching moment, man, that's the good stuff. That's the good stuff. And that's the context that we try to bring to you guys on a weekly basis. And we hope you enjoyed that.
And I was gonna say, I don't like to pat ourselves on the back at any time, because I think it's like stupid or weird, but you're not going to get that anywhere else. Like, I know that clip has been like circulating, and it's just like, oh, look at Diggs like coaching these guys up, but knowing exactly what he's coaching them up about, and then matching it with actual real life game clips to translate that and show you what's going on, you're not going to get that anywhere else than here in like the Cover One film room. And I'm not just saying that because we're part of this show. Like, that's not happening anywhere else. And that's why, great comment there from Michael, saying the DBs are always looking for keys. If you can make multiple routes look the same or make them unpredictable, you're harder to cover. And then Michael says Diggs is so good at that in his comment after. Absolutely. And that, again, Eric, that's what you're trying to teach for these other guys. You want everybody to be able to operate like you want a whole wide receiver room of Stefon Diggses. You want them to be able to see the game that way and understand the game that way and operate with that deception and be able to sell lies to the DB in order to fool them, because you can win that way. Sometimes it's not just about physical ability. And again, Eric, to your point, that's why these clips are so valuable on this show and valuable in our hands, because instead of just looking at it and being like, oh, look at a clip of Stefon Diggs, the leader, we're able to take it and dive into it and break down and show you folks what it actually means and how it actually translates. Eric, I want to grab, we spoke about this earlier a little bit, but AJ, former Cover One intern, and who's on to some new things now.
What up, AJ?
Stopping by and being here. AJ says, can you teach Gabe Davis to do things like this? Or is it something you just quote unquote have as a receiver and it's something you can't really teach?
This is a great question. And I think I don't want to say no, because he does do this, but he does it in a different realm, a different route tree.
There it is.
So he's the vertical guy, right? Well, guess what he excels at aside from getting vertically? Hitting the post, hitting those corners, hitting those stop routes. So he does it. He just does it from the boundary. He was on the boundary, 90% of the time last year. So he does it. He just does it with a different route tree, right? And a different skill set, because he's a bigger wide receiver, but he did trim down already. He trimmed down. He's a little lighter this year. Keep that in mind. But yeah, he does it. He just does it with different routes. And a lot of those routes are usually those 45-degree breaks. He's one of the best post runners and corner runners in the league. We saw that multiple times over the course of his career. So it just, again, it's a different skill set because he's got a different body on him and he's physically different than other receivers. So I don't think you want him running a lot of whip routes in the first place, because defensive coverage defenders aren't also not going to defend him in the same way that they are going to defend Diggs. They're not going to be trapping a guy like Gabriel Davis, running a whip route. That's Stefon Diggs. You're going to do that. Cole Beasley, you're going to do that. Cooper Kupp, you're going to do that. So I think asking him to do that would be wrong. And so I think he excels in the very same way at making routes look similar and that deception angle, but just different routes.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And just AJ, kind of just like as a general rule, like when you can teach route running and nuance to that degree. But then also building off of Eric's point, like you just have to tweak it a little bit based on the skill set of your receiver, the body type of your receiver. How do they run? Like Gabe Davis, and say you wanted to make Gabe Davis run the Stefon Diggs route tree like that. Gabe Davis is much different physiologically than Stefon Diggs. So the way that he would run that route, you can get the same result, but how you get him there physically would have to be a little different because, again, body type, skill sets, and all those pieces. But yeah, and Eric, that's a great point too. I feel like, granted, I think, and I know you in particular have been a bigger defender, or one of the biggest defenders of Gabe Davis, but I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for the nuance that he shows when he runs those post routes, when he runs those vertical routes. There's a couple clips even in that. Oh, actually, I think that clip, the Diggs clip, pull up that clip. Watch him burn DJ Reed on the bottom of the screen, a corner who had a lights out year for the Jets. All Davis does is run a vertical on that play, but the way he paces it and kicks it into another gear, he blows right by, or maybe that's not, I'm sorry, that might not be that clip. He blows right by DJ Reed. It's one of the scramble clips, I think, from Allen later, but there's nuance that Davis operates with. Maybe not in those short areas or like Stefon Diggs does, but when he's running those comebacks, when he's running those posts, when he's running those corners, he shows some of that route running nuance, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing for a bigger guy with his frame and stature.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's the thing, there are different roles in an offense, especially if you're talking the Bills offense the last few years. They've, for the most part, aside from last year, towards the end of the year, they started incorporating some of the stuff that they did well with Dave's, especially if you're talking the red zone. But this offense has certain roles. And that's why, like, if you see a offensive player, a wide receiver go down, they're going to try to look for a guy that fills that specific role that guy kind of, did when he was healthy. So I do think that there are different roles, there are different skill sets. And I think if you're talking outside on the boundary, Davis does a lot of those deceiving type routes in a different way than if Diggs was out there, or if Diggs was in the slot. It just again, different bodies, different skill sets, and it's just maximizing those plays. And I think that's what the Bills have done pretty well, and really consistently for the most part, if we're talking roles in the offense over the last few years. So let's see, what other questions do we have? Send us your questions before we wrap. We're actually, man, we've moved it along pretty well, Anthony. Normally we're like at the end of the show, it's an hour and 20 minutes.
Do you still have I have it queued up if you want, but do you still have the Bills home game versus the Jets in huddle queued up?
Which one? December?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That second one. If you go to play 19, it was a 3rd and 15 and a 16-yard gain.
Play 19? Yeah. Boom. Got it.
That should have a little, if we share that should be the one of Gabe Davis. He just runs a vertical at the bottom of the screen. Yep, that's it. Gabe Davis at the bottom of the screen. And watch how he paces. This is the one I was talking about. He paces it. So he's running a go. He doesn't come out like game busters. He paces it, and then he bends it a little inside and attacks Reed and then blows right by him. That's a little piece there. I think it gets lost in the simplicity of everything, or in the larger context of the game. Like, he just runs downfield. He doesn't get the ball. Allen scrambles, gets the first down, but he paces it. He eyeballs DJ Reed and runs right at him, which is what makes Reed kind of pause his feet and square up a little bit. And once Davis sees that, he flips him and just goes right up the sideline and beats him vertically. Like, that's a piece that, again, I think people just think, oh, well, he's just running vertically, but he stems this well. Look, and he gets Reed to be able to turn inside out and then beats him up the field. Like, that's a nice piece on a route that is, quote unquote, a simpler route tree kind of route.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's see. We had a question about Morris. Michael asked about Morris. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that he hasn't really practiced, and I'm honestly kind of surprised no one's asked why he isn't practicing. Not that
I didn't even know that until today. Like, I was like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand and know why he is, but that's not my place to say that. So I would suggest people actually do their job and ask the question. So let's see. What else do we have here? AJ again. Who do you like more, Jets or Dolphins? That's a good question, eh? You want to kick that one off?
What do you mean, like as in like who I'd root for, or who do I think is the better team? If I'll start with who I think is the better. I think the Jets are a very good football team.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense,
yeah.
Their defense, like with depending on how you filter it for like qualifying quarterbacks, they had like the 2 worst quarterbacks last year in the NFL with Flacco. Oh, who was a better team? Awesome, AJ. So if you look at their quarterback play, they were so significantly hindered by their quarterback play last year with Flacco and Zach Wilson, to the point that when Mike White was in there, they were so much of a better offense. No disrespect to Mike White. Breece Hall goes down. They were playing with like 3rd and 4th stringers on the offensive line. And even with all that, their stellar defense and what they did, granted they, schedule pieces and who they play, yada, yada, they still almost made the playoffs. Now you get, in theory, a healthier offensive line. I know Breece Hall's coming back from an ACL. We'll see how, he comes back from that. But Garrett Wilson was a stud last year. You put Aaron Rodgers into that offense. You bring in Alan Lazard, who isn't a stud, but is a solid receiver. Mm-hmm. Even if Aaron Rodgers, he doesn't have to be Green Bay Packers Aaron Rodgers. Just be halfway decent. Just be like the 15th to 12th best quarterback in the NFL, and you put him in with those weapons and a really good talent defense and a really well-coached defense. I think the Jets are a problem. Like, I think they're a good football team. Like I said it last year before, Eric, before the Bills lost to the Jets in New York. Like, I thought the Jets were a good ball club, and even with all the chaos on offense, they still had a pretty good year last year. And if they can be more consistent there, I think they're a scary team.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I think it's close because I do think that both of these teams kind of close that gap to the Bills.
Absolutely.
But I love the scheme that the Dolphins have on both sides of the ball now with Vic Fangio on defense and some of the talent they have there. You think about that. I like both of their schemes. They're very X's and O's oriented. They're very analytical when we're talking 2 high structures by Fangio. And then some of that Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel's zone running game, zone scheme, bootleg looks like that.
And think of the players like on offense, you've got like Hill and Waddle in it, and then on defense,
vertical too.
Yes, and then on defense, like, you know, it'd be super fun if you're running Fangio's scheme. Oh, like Javon Holland and Jalen Ramsey, like
So, but what for me the separator right now is the line of scrimmage and the ability to be physical up front. That demeanor that the Jets defense plays with is very difficult to replicate, and it's very difficult to be consistently good on offense versus that type of defense. And so, I do expect the Dolphins to be better on defense because they got, better in the personnel department. They got a lot better when it comes to their scheme with Fangio. But right now, I'd give the edge to the Jets because they have that mentality that you want on defense, and they're going to punch people in the mouth. But then now they have that balance on offense where if teams get up a few scores on the Jets, the defense can kind of buckle in, and then the offense can come back. Now they have enough firepower, in my opinion, to make it more of a game and at the very least keep things closer than in years past. Right now, I think up front, the mentality that they play with for their head coach is a little different than what we see from the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. Like, their defensive line last year with Franklin Myers and Quinnen Williams and Bryce Huff and Carl Lawson coming back from his Achilles injury. Like, so in theory, similar to what we talked about for Trey White, like Carl Lawson should have a better year this year because he's second year coming back from that Achilles injury. Quinnen Williams is an all-pro stud inside. Jermaine Johnson from Florida State, who was a rookie last year, enters year 2. He could be better. We'll see what they get from Will McDonald, that edge out of Iowa State, who played in that wonky 3-3-5 at Iowa State. But exactly like you said, Eric, right? Like they just have a mentality about them that
attack, right?
Yes,
They just
Robert Saleh brought
nonstop.
it. It's the San Francisco 49ers mentality. Like, they breed velociraptors. Saleh carried it with him. It took him a little bit to kind of get the personnel in place to run it, but that's a great question there, AJ. And this division, even though like the Patriots for me are at the bottom of the division, but they still have a really good defense and like a lot of fun players on that side of the ball. The AFC East, and as a Bills fan, as a football fan, I love the AFC East. As a Bills fan, I'm annoyed as hell because, of course, the Bills are really good, and now everybody in the AFC East wants to be good after years of ineptitude. But that's the state of things for the Buffalo Bills. But the Bills are well equipped. And throughout this entire offseason here in the Cover One Film Room, we will continue to show you folks how the Buffalo Bills are well equipped and how they'll take teams on in the AFC East and the NFL as a whole. And Erik, just in case people want to take that even further, if they want early access and inside knowledge to player acquisitions or player developments in the offseason or extra content that you can't get anywhere else or an awesome Slack channel that isn't toxic like most social media, where do you think someone wanting all those things could go? What's something they could potentially do?
Well, you start off by going to cover1.football, and on the site, you're going to see One Pass subscription, and that's our premium subscription. You get, written content on the website from some of the best writers in the business. You're going to get obviously some scouting reports. You're going to get some, we do some video classes on scheme and technique and stuff just for insiders. And more importantly, as Anthony said, the Slack channel, it's, our little community that we've built for our support system, our insiders, our guys that are there supporting us and have been supporting us from day one. And we talk football all day in there. We talk, there's a film channel, there's analytics channel, there's fantasy football, there's fantasy leagues, there's a little bit of everything. It's our community. And these are guys, as Michael is one of them, that, you talked about it earlier, guys that have been there for us for many years. And guys, when we do go to camp, when we do have events, which we're going to have several events this year, guys, we do get to see these guys and meet these guys in person. And that community is probably one of the proudest things that I'm the most proud of when it comes to this brand and what we built. And keep in mind, we call it insiders for a reason. There are certain things that we don't share on social media, on other platforms, on shows that we do share in there because we, again, we take everything that, we've built and we sunk it into that Slack channel and those community and that relationship and those communities. So again, become an insider on the website, cover1.football. It's $57 for the year. You get that behind the scenes content and more importantly, that community, that Slack channel, and some really good friendships that are built from that community.
Yeah, the insider moniker isn't on accident. It's purposeful because of the access of information you get to that doesn't ever really see the light of day from anywhere or anyone else, or you get early access to it. There's a lot of things that get broken in there that end up coming to light nationally or locally later. And yeah, Erik, to your point, and I say this every single time, like the Slack channel is my favorite thing from the insider piece. And it's legitimately a really cool thing to go to training camp or to go to a practice or to go to a Bills game. And somebody walks up to you and is like, oh, like Anthony, like it's so-and-so from the Slack channel. And they give me like what their handle is. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, and then you get their real name and then like, you're just talking ball and hanging out. Like it's a really cool piece. You mentioned it, like Michael is one of those guys, like multiple, I think Bills practices and training camp last year. Just hanging out with him and other people we met along the way, like Lackawanna Chuck is another one for me. It's just an awesome community environment of people. Everybody has their different type of fandom and their niche for it, but what the kind of fandom that Cover One has catered to, that's the type of like mind you get in that Slack channel. It's just a bunch of good people wanting to talk about ball and wanting insight into the X's and O's of the Buffalo Bills and football in general. And that's what we have there with that Cover One Pass and becoming an insider. And Erik, we went inside to Buffalo Bills minicamp today with Alex Brasky in the beginning of this episode, and then we broke down some tape and a bunch of different pieces. This was a nice way to start to really, we've talked about it, the offseason happening in stages and how we're moving forward. We're starting to, cook with gas a little bit here, and we're getting real practices, mandatory practices, not just OTAs.
We're losing you, Ant. The weather's kicking, and I think that storm's hitting. No, you know what? You're talking cooking with gas, Ant. I love that you kind of gave me that segue, unintentionally, of course, because you're breaking up a little bit. But we're talking about schedule and what's around the corner. So as of right now, next week, the show is going to be breaking down Kaiir Elam. And Mr. Kaiir Elam will be joining us in the film room next Wednesday at 7 p.m. So make sure to, again, like this video, like all of our content on the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave us a comment and what you want us to talk about with Kaiir next week. There's a few plays lined up that we're going to break down from his rookie season and obviously dive into some other analytical talk when it comes to his game, technique, and things he's learned along the way and what he's looking to do this coming season. Again, another big season, as Alex said, we do think that Elam and the Bills want Elam to kind of take that job. So as of right now, as I said, I've been working on it for a couple weeks now. And as of right now, next week, 7 o'clock, we'll be breaking down film with Mr. Kaiir Elam.
And hopefully my stream doesn't drop like it did a minute ago. That would be quite unfortunate. Yeah. So again, you folks who tune in regularly to the show, we aim for that in the offseason. Last offseason, it was Mitch Morse and Ryan Bates and Shaq Lawson and Isaiah Hodgins. And in season, we had Daquan Jones. So tune in for that next week, live Wednesday, June 21st, 7 p.m. Eastern, where we will be breaking down some game tape with year 2 corner Kaiir Elam, who, it would be awesome if he ascended and took that job, given his skill set and his physical traits and abilities. Erik, anything else for the fine folks here before we bid them adieu?
No, again, just thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I know there's been a lot of drama around this team, but it's good. As we said yesterday, it's good to now, put that behind us and start talking football, because pretty soon, Anthony, you, myself, and many of the guys at the network will be at camp. We usually get an Airbnb, get a house for the week, and guys come down there, sporadically throughout that. So I'm excited for that, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We still got some time to enjoy, other things with this team, and let's just hope that the drama is now on the back burner and we can actually start this 2023 season.
Yes, hopefully, fingers crossed, and get back to the real nuts and bolts of football instead of trying to pick people's press conferences apart and their verbiage and try and infer what they meant and what's going to happen in the future. So yes, we're very excited for that here on this show. Like Erik said, we couldn't do this without you folks, so we appreciate the hell out of you. For those who rode with us live on this episode, thank you very much for tuning in live. We appreciate the hell out of you for that. Before you go, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. They impact the algorithm significantly and helps push us onwards and upwards. So please drop a like if you'd be so kind. If you are watching later and you're not watching live, we appreciate your post-live view. Please, if you would be so kind, drop a like as well. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. We appreciate your listen, your download, whatever have you. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of those platforms, please drop a rating and a review. And if you're listening on one of the audio platforms or watching here on YouTube, please, and thank you, subscribe to the Film Room, to the Cover One channel as a whole. We have you covered every single day of the week with any and every type of Bills content that you could possibly need in your life. Again, we appreciate you folks more than you know. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Take care of one another. Be kind to one another. We will see you next week, live Wednesday, June 21st, 7 p.m. Eastern, for a film breakdown with Bills corner Kaiir Elam. Spread the word. Tell your family and friends and everyone who you care about how awesome it's going to be, because it is. If you know somebody who's asleep right now, wake them the hell up and tell them about it, and make sure they set an alarm or their calendar date, because it's going to be a sick episode. Until next week, this has been another episode of the Cover One Film Room. I am Anthony Prohaska. That's Erik Turner. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.